I've been thinking, if I had to start investing from scratch, knowing what I know now, what would I do differently? And after buying dozens of properties for myself and my clients combined, I can tell you there's definitely a few things I'd do differently. Some lessons I learned the hard way, others I figured out along the way, but all of them would change how I build a portfolio from scratch today. If I were to start again, there are 5 key things I'd focus on that would make all the difference, and I want to share them with you today. Starting with the first lesson, prioritize properties with strong capital growth potential to build long-term wealth, not just high rental yields for short-term cash flow. A lot of investors get caught up in rental yield, which is how much income a property generates relative to its price. While rental income can help with cash flow, it's not what creates real wealth. What actually moves the needle is capital growth. A property that appreciates in value allows you to build equity, reinvest, and grow your portfolio. So if you focus solely on rental yield, you risk getting stuck with properties that don't grow in value, meaning your ability to reinvest is limited. This is something I had to learn firsthand. When I bought my first property, an apartment in Blacktown, I thought I was making a solid investment. It was in a high-growth suburb, and I assumed that it meant the property itself would perform well. Nearly a decade later, it has barely grown in value. It's currently worth around $450,000, and I bought it for $411,000 in 2015, to put that into perspective. But get this, house values in the same area have more than doubled. The reason is simple. Land appreciates and buildings depreciate. Apartments in high-density areas tend to have slow growth because new supply is constantly being added to the market, keeping prices stagnant. Had I focused on capital growth over affordability, I would have bought a house in an up-and-coming suburb instead that would have given me more equity to reinvest and scale my portfolio much faster. If I was starting again today, I would make sure that every property I buy has strong growth potential. That means looking in areas with high demand, low supply, infrastructure investment, and strong affordability among the locals. It also means prioritizing houses over apartments, particularly in suburbs where land is scarce and demand is increasing. Cash flow keeps you in the game, but capital growth is what eventually helps you win the game. The second key lesson is to expand your thinking beyond your own city or suburb by looking at suburbs and cities with strong economic and population growth. After buying my first property, I started looking for my next investment. At the time, it felt natural to stay in Sydney. I knew the market well, I could drive past potential properties, and it just seemed like the safest option. But I quickly realized that sticking to what's familiar can limit your growth. Sydney prices were rising fast, and my budget wasn't stretching as far as I wanted. Instead of pushing forward with another Sydney property, I started looking at what was happening in other cities. That's when I came across Brisbane. At the time, Redcliffe was going through a major transformation. More young families were moving in, pushing up demand. Infrastructure projects were underway, improving transport links. It had great lifestyle appeal, being close to the beach, but still affordable. I bought a house there for $402,000. By 2024, it's worth over $750,000. So that decision has definitely paid off. The best investments aren't always where you live. Every city moves through different growth cycles. While one is cooling down, another is just starting to take off. That's why some investors build multi-million-dollar portfolios quickly while others sit on properties that barely move. If I was starting my investment journey from scratch, I wouldn't limit myself to just one location. Instead, I would research cities with strong economic drivers, such as population growth, job creation, and infrastructure investment. Look for markets before they boom instead of chasing hype. Prioritize demand over familiarity. Just because I live in the same city and know a suburb well, doesn't mean it's the best place to invest. The next lesson is to build a team of property experts to avoid expensive mistakes and scale faster. In the early days of my journey, I made decisions based on what I thought was right because I read books, watched videos, and spent hours researching properties. I relied on my own research to choose properties and negotiated my own deals, for example. But looking back, I can see where working with the right experts earlier would have saved me time, money, and stress. One of the biggest shifts in my approach came from when I started surrounding myself with professionals who specialized in different parts of the investment process. Instead of trying to figure out everything by myself, I started leveraging people who do this every single day. Some investors resist building a team because they think they're saving money by doing everything themselves. But in reality, the cost of not having the right experts is far greater than the cost of working with them. If I had my time again, I wouldn't wait to build these relationships. I'd have these experts in place before even looking at my first property. A mortgage broker who understands investment loans. The wrong loan structure can limit how quickly you grow your portfolio. A good broker makes sure you're setting yourself up to borrow again in the future. A buyer's agent to help you identify high growth markets and negotiate the best possible price. A good one will have relationships with lots of sales agents and get access to off-market deals, which can be incredibly valuable given how competitive the market is. A property savvy accountant. Not just someone who does tax returns, but an accountant who understands property investors, structuring, and long-term planning for people like us. A solicitor or conveyancer. A strong legal expert can ensure you're not caught off guard by contract terms that could cost you later. The faster you surround yourself with the right people, the faster you'll make smart, scalable investment decisions. And if someone's advising you to buy an off-the-plan apartment, just tell them to f*** off. Lesson 4 is to block out the media hype and focus on market fundamentals. One of the biggest mistakes investors make is letting media headlines dictate their decisions. When prices are rising, the media is full of stories about an unstoppable boom. And when prices drop, they warn of a housing crash. But I've learned that the best investment decisions aren't made by following the headlines. They're made by following the data. If I'd relied on the media, I would have never invested in Perth in 2022. At the time, it wasn't making the kind of headlines that got investors excited. At the time, a lot of reports were warning that interest rate rises would cause the market to crash and that investors should wait until markets come back down, potentially years later. But when I looked at the fundamentals, affordability, rising demand, and major infrastructure projects, I could see the potential. I bought a house for $556,000, and in just 2 years, it has grown by over $300,000, and it continues to rise. So instead, you should focus on the data, not the headlines. Look at supply, demand, vacancy rates, rental yields, and infrastructure investment, rather than reacting to news headlines that are designed to create fear. Market cycles. No city booms forever, and downturns often create the best buying opportunities. Long-term fundamentals. A strong investment isn't determined by what's happening today, it's about where the market will be in 5 or 10 years' time. Remember, the media's job is to get attention, not to help you make smarter investment decisions. The sooner you focus on fundamentals over fear, the sooner you'll start making decisions that actually build wealth. The last thing you should focus on if you're investing from scratch is to use your equity strategically to scale your portfolio faster. Everything in property investing comes back to capital growth. The reason growth is so important isn't just because your net worth increases. It's because it gives you access to equity, which allows you to reinvest without having to save another deposit from scratch. This is how investors go from owning one property to building a multi-million-dollar portfolio. They don't wait years to save up a deposit for each purchase. They leverage the increased value of their existing properties to fund the next one. So what exactly is equity? Equity is the difference between your property's market value and the amount you owe on your loan. For example, if your property is worth $800,000 and your mortgage is $500,000, you have $300,000 in equity. Not all of this is accessible, but lenders will generally allow you to borrow against a portion of it, typically 80% of the property's value minus what you owe. This is how I was able to keep building my portfolio. My Redcliffe property almost doubled in value and gave me a lot of equity, which I was able to use to fund my next purchase in Margate, without having to spend years saving for another deposit. The key to using equity effectively is to buy properties that are likely to grow in value so you can always have equity to leverage. Structure your loans correctly from the start so you can access that equity when needed. Keep your borrowing capacity in check so you don't overextend yourself, but still maintain momentum. A lot of investors make the mistake of thinking property is just about buying and holding, but really it's about buying, holding, leveraging, and then reinvesting. If you understand how to use your equities strategically, you don't have to wait years between purchases. You can scale much faster and build a portfolio that keeps working for you. Looking back, if I understood these things earlier, I would have moved a lot faster. But the good news is, if you apply these lessons now, as you start your journey this year, you don't have to learn them the hard way. If you would like to know more about how I built my property portfolio, go check out this video. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.